Okay, let us talk about Deep Ones. They are most famously portrayed in Lovecraft's story, The Shadow Over Innsmouth. Now, what is a Deep One? Well, first off, a Deep One is a kind of a grayish-green fish frog thing. It's not really humanoid, vaguely humanoid, I guess. They have a strange biology in that they can interbreed with humans and produce ultimately Deep One offspring. Probably they can interbreed with any vertebrate, from fish up through mammals, and possibly some invertebrates as well. It's easy to imagine them interbreeding with squid or octopi, for example, maybe some other things, crabs or whatever. In Brian Desna's movie Dagon, it seems they've been doing just that. They are more octopusy than fish and frog. But what are the Deep Ones? Well, they have this strange biology. They're not aliens, because in the first place, aliens probably couldn't breed with us. And in the second place, they're clearly Earth life. I mean, they look like Earth creatures. They have bones, they have flesh, they have scales. And Lovecraft's very careful with his alien races to have them not be human-like at all. They're utterly alien. So, not from outer space, they're from Earth, but they don't have a life cycle like anything else on Earth. Nothing else can crossbreed like this. And furthermore, Lovecraft has actually given us a couple stories, most famously The Shadow Out of Time and At the Mountains of Madness, where he covers the history of the Earth almost from the beginnings on up and all the intelligent races that have lived here. And interestingly, the Deep Ones aren't mentioned anywhere. We have the Old Ones fighting the Starspawn, and the Yithians fighting the Old Ones, and the Thundra from Yuggoth fighting everyone, and all these different races and things, and the story of the Old Ones goes clear on up to only about 10,000 years ago. Deep Ones never show up. So let's think about this mystery. We have the Deep Ones. They have a weird biology that makes no sense. They have a kind of a weird look that makes no sense, because logically, if you were going to have creatures that live in the deep sea, well, I mean, we know what those things look like. They don't have hands. They don't have manipulatory organs. They are, fish or worms or crabs or something. They aren't like us. And they're not apparently ancient, because no one has ever talked about meeting them in the ancient's life. Okay, they're around. They're not around during the time of the Old Ones or the Yithians. What are they? Well, I think it's pretty clear that what the Deep Ones actually are is an artificial creation of Cthulhu to have a being that can interact with the humans, which are the current race that he is interested in. And the Deep One's function is probably to communicate with us, to deal with us, to exchange with us, and, if necessary, destroy and replace us. This also would explain why the Deep Ones maybe don't seem very interested in worshiping Cthulhu. In The Shadow Over Innsmouth, they don't worship the cult of Cthulhu. They have their own cult they've made up for the humans to deal with them. If they're his creations, creatures of Cthulhu, they aren't his worshippers. They're just his things that he sends out, and they do his will because he formed them to do that. That's what they're designed to function. He doesn't care if they worship him or not. They're his tools. They do things for him. So that's what the Deep Ones are, a creation of Cthulhu to interact with humans. Now let's talk about how they can interact. Now in the story, The Shadow Over Innsmouth, one of the characters says if the Deep Ones wanted to, they could easily clear off all humanity. Well, it's possible this is true, but it's also possible that this is just like Deep One propaganda, trying to make him sound cool. Especially since later on in the story, they fire some torpedoes into the city of Yaha and Clay, and it seems to set back their plans quite a bit. Doesn't destroy them, doesn't wipe them out, but they didn't like it. Now, we're going to talk about how to fight a Deep One in two different parts. The first is, what would the Deep Ones do if they did rise up and essentially declared war on humanity and tried to come clear us off? The second part we'll get to later is what happens if a Deep One comes after you personally. What can you do to handle that Deep One? So, first, the war thing. So Deep Ones don't die naturally. They can effectively live forever as long as they're not killed. Interestingly, their size is a function of their food supply. If you keep feeding a deep one lots of food, it doesn't get fat like me. It just gets bigger, larger overall. So you can grow a deep one to the size of a whale. Probably those interbreed with whales if they want to, or prey on them. Or you can starve a deep one. There's a story about August Derleth where a deep one is starved for a period of years and it gets smaller and smaller until finally it's like the size of a frog. Now, the deep ones may not have a function for a little tiny one. They might mostly want to be human size or a little bigger, it seems, but they can grow and grow. They have hands. They're webbed, but they have manipulatory organs. On land, they move with a sort of a hopping, lurching motion. Probably a human can outrun them on land. In the water, of course, they're faster, but that's not probably where we're going to be fighting them. What about their technology? We know that the deep ones have metal working. Their silver and gold ornaments are well known that are in museums around the world, so they can work metal. But interestingly, the metals that we see them working are metals that are not that would survive underwater, that wouldn't corrode. So probably they don't really use iron or steel. They don't use things that wouldn't be good underwater. They might be working the metal by some kind of chemical or process or an enzyme that may not actually be smelting it. Who knows? Or maybe they are using heat in some kind of vacuum. But in any case, it seems like they have trouble with some kinds of metal because they're underwater. And another problem they have is they probably don't have combustibles. So firearms are probably not part of their military apparatus. They don't have guns. Well, that gives us a little bit of edge. We have guns. We have grenades. We have napalm. They don't have those. What do they have? Well, the deep sea has a lot of toxins and toxic things, from stonefish to box jellyfish to who knows what, probably things they have involved. The deep ones are intelligent. They probably adapted to use these. So what are they going to have? Well, they're going to have nerve gas. They're going to have poisons. They're going to have venoms. In the story, The Call of Cthulhu, it's telling that the way they kill the hero's uncle is with a poison needle. The Cult of Cthulhu. They know all about toxins. Deep ones are just as smart as a person, and they live longer, so they may be wiser. And here's a critical feature. A lot of the deep ones actually were human in their early life. They started out looking like a human. They lived as a human for a while, then eventually they change, and over time they degenerate into a deep one and go live under the sea. But they live for decades as a human. They can join our army. They can do things. They can go to college. They know all about us. Everything we have no surprises for the deep ones. They know everything about us because a lot of them were us. But we don't really know what they have under the sea. Even the deep one hybrids that live on lands don't know everything. So they're going to have surprises for us. This gives them a kind of an advantage in the war when we don't know what they have and they do know what we have and what we can do. Plus, they have agents among us, or can do, deep one hybrids who are living with us. Maybe we might be able to find some way of identifying these individuals, doing a genetic analysis or a DNA test or something. But it's still going to be an issue and a threat and a problem for us. So they have agents with us, and we don't have agents within them. They know what we're doing. We don't know what they're doing. All this gives them an edge strategically. What about tactically? We have war machines. We have tanks. We have battleships. Well, we don't have battleships anymore, but we have warships. We have airplanes. What do they have to match us besides their nerve gas and toxins? Now, obviously, nerve gas is a pretty effective weapon of mass destruction, but what else do they have? The answer is what we humans would probably call magic, but which Lovecraft always described as otherworldly science. And what do they use this science for? Well, they can control creatures, life. Deep one science is presumably biologically based rather than mechanically. What can they do with this biological science? Well, let's talk about some of the creatures we know they have at their disposal. First is a Shoggoth. Well, I have another video called How to Fight a Shoggoth where I describe just how terrifying a Shoggoth is. A Shoggoth is easily able to stand up to human weapons and cause trouble for us. How do the Deep Ones control it? Well, the way the Deep Ones maintain a Shoggoth is almost as terrifying as the Shoggoth themselves. They have a special class, a job, if you were, of Deep Ones called the Shoggoth Tusha. I'm not pronouncing it right. I can't pronounce it right because I'm not a Deep One. If I could, then I'd probably be part Deep One, and then this would be propaganda to you to convince you not to fight us instead of advice on how to fight them. So the Shoggoth Tusha takes tissue from his Shoggoth and grafts it somehow onto his body, usually his hands or places, and then he can manipulate that tissue and his limbs, and it maintains a kind of psychic connection to the Shoggoth, and it can control it and operate it from a distance. Each Shoggoth has one Shoggoth Tusha, kind of the way that in the olden days, even in modern times, one Mahout would control one elephant, and that would be his elephant. He'd have that elephant for decades of his life, maybe his whole life. That would be his one elephant. Each Shoggoth Tusha has one Shoggoth. If you need to merge multiple Shoggoths together to make a giant one, presumably the Shoggoth Tushas all work together to do that. But so they have Shoggoths. The Shoggoth is a threat which is obviously difficult to deal with. Watch my video on that to see just how dangerous. But the Shoggoth Tusha can control it. I guess you could try to snipe the Shoggoth Tusha to kill it, but they know that we have snipers. They might hide or be hard to spot. So they got Shoggoths. What else? Well, they are working for Cthulhu in a sense, so they probably have access to Cthulhu's race, the Starspawns. This is the species that Cthulhu belongs to. He's not a one-of-a-kind god. He's like the high priest of the Starspawn. So what about a Starspawn? Well, they're huge, like Cthulhu. They're otherworldly, unlike Shoggoths and the Deep Ones, and they have amazing powers. Sometime soon I'll be doing a video on how to fight a Starspawn to show you just how terrifying they are. But suffice it to say that a Starspawn is easily able to take on and be a match for a nuclear sub or a carrier or a Air Force squadron. They are absolutely terrifying. So they have Starspawn. What else? Especially winged things, because we have airplanes. Deep Ones can't fly. They don't have airplanes. How can they handle that? Well, Starspawn can fly, so that's one aspect, but there's another feature. In the story The Call of Cthulhu, winged animals are mentioned. A lot of people skip over this, but in the scene that takes place in the Louisiana Bayou, the cultists make the statement that they didn't kill any of the people who were killed here. It was done by blacked winged things that flapped out of the bayou. Also in that story, they mention a large white polypus thing off in the distance that's doing something. It's white, so I don't think it's a Starspawn. They seem to be green, but maybe they can change, or maybe it's something else. There's other creatures they have access to. What are these black winged things? I don't know. But if they can summon and control these with their otherworldly science, if they can get Biakis or hunting horrors or other winged animals, they have something that can fly and possibly cause trouble with our aircraft. You'd be thinking, well, how can a flying bat thing cause any trouble to an F-35? Well, the answer is quite simple, that the Biaki are not just a flying bat thing. I don't know how fast they are in an Earth's atmosphere, but between the stars, they can go faster than light. That's pretty advanced and terrifying. The hunting horrors can not only go faster than light, but they also have the ability, or the feature, that once they start tracking on something and they're fixated on it, they physically can't stop tracking it. So they're almost like a heat-seeking missile. Go after it, knock it down. And they're big. They're hard to destroy. So an F-35 may be able to shoot these things down or cause trouble to them, or another jet plane. But the bottom line is that the Deep Ones are not helpless against our weapons. They have weapons of their own that are comparable but different. They have their nerve gas. They're attacking by surprise out of the sea where it's hard for us to function. They have agents within us. And the outcome of this war is far from clear to me. It seems like they might be able to win. On the other hand, we're going to cause serious damage to them. And who knows, maybe we could win. It also seems unlikely they could actually wipe us out, because we can hide up in the mountains or there's places we can go. It might be awkward for them to get to. But likewise, it'd be really hard for us to wipe them out. What are we going to do? Drop depth charges to the bottom of Marianas Trench? Well, maybe, I guess, but they have the whole ocean to hide in. So probably neither of us are going to exterminate each other, but they could destroy our civilization, or maybe we could destroy theirs. It'd be an interesting war. Maybe someday I'll do a game based on the war of the Deep Ones and the humans. Anyway, going on to the next part of it. So in the war, it's not looking good for the humans, but maybe we can win. Certainly it's going to be a challenge for the Deep Ones. But what about when a Deep One is coming for just you? It wants to get you. Well, first off, you have a big advantage over the Deep Ones, and that is that you have guns. They probably don't. They probably stuck with thrown weapons, or they do have magic, but Lovecraftian magic, or arcane science, shall we call it, isn't really designed to blast a guy from a distance. It's not fireballs. It's swaying your mind or summoning things from beyond or changing the angles or the geometry. This is all effective stuff, probably better than a fireball in the long run, but it's no, Avada Kedavra that instantly zaps you. But for that case, even Avada Kedavra isn't as good as a pistol. Just, you can get that off faster than a spell. So you have guns. The Deep Ones don't have guns, and you have another advantage, that Deep Ones aren't other planar. They're made of our kind of matter. So a gun or a knife or a hand grenade would kill one. Now, they're big, and probably the ones coming after you are going to be bigger than the average human, so it won't be that easy to take one out. I wouldn't really advise using a knife or a sword, because even if it doesn't have a weapon of its own, it's big, it has claws, it has fangs, it's tough, it's smart. It's risky. I mean, you can go up against a bear with a sword and maybe beat it, but a Deep One is maybe as big as a bear and it's smarter, and I would not be happy with that. We have another advantage. We're faster than the Deep Ones on land. They have to hop and lurch around. They aren't as good on land. We are. So we can do the famous shoot and scoot, beloved of first-person shooters or RTS games, where you shoot, run away, turn around, shoot again, turn, run away, shoot again. Now, this only works if the enemy doesn't have cover. So if it's fighting you in a city, it can use cover. If it's emerging from the beach when you're right there, suddenly comes out of the water, maybe you won't be ready for it. Now, this shoot and scoot thing only works if you can keep on retreating indefinitely and the enemy doesn't have some kind of cover. If it's fighting you in a city, you may not be able to use that so effectively, because suddenly it emerges from the sewer entrance, or it comes out of a building it crawled through, or it's there behind you, or it's at the beach rising up from the sea. You might not always be ready for it then, or prepared to do it. But it still gives you something you can do, and they have to work around it. Another thing you can try to do is lead them into a trap or an ambush. Of course, they're smart. They're trying not to be led into the trap or the ambush. They know what your rifle can do. So they may be trying to lead you into a trap besides. So probably whichever of you succeeds in tricking the other is going to win. The paradox of the Deep Ones is that when they're having a war on humanity, they might be able to win. But one-on-one, a Deep One and a human, we have a pretty good chance of beating them, at least if we know they're coming. I think this is why they tend to be more secretive. They attack from surprise or ambush and kidnap you from your hotel room, because they know if they give us a fair chance in an open field, humans are pretty dangerous. And that's kind of refreshing to have a Lovecraftian monster, which in fact we can defeat if we have enough, if we're prepared and know what we're doing. Because that's not the case with every Lovecraft monster. So the Deep Ones are comparable to us, defeatable by us. They have advantages, but we can maximize our advantages and thus overcome them. And this is a little bit of hope for us. So there it is.